Others were disturbed by how easily they fell back into patterns of violence that humanity had supposedly left behind. Lieutenant Junho Lee sat in the Vrexian Dominion was collapsing. Not from external invasion alone, but from the weight of its own desperate mobilization. Every colony had been stripped of resources to feed the war machine. Every ship had been pressed into military service. The economy was failing as factories produced only weapons while people went hungry. Commander Dae Hyun, now promoted to Fleet Admiral after his defense of New Jeju, led the advance toward the Vrexian core worlds. His ships encountered less resistance each day, not because the enemy was defeated, but because they were pulling everything back to protect their home system. "Sir, we're intercepting communications from Vrexian leadership," his intelligence officer reported. "They're planning one final defensive stand around their homeworld. Everything they have left will be concentrated there." Dae Hyun studied the tactical projections. How many ships? Approximately 3,000 vessels. Everything from military cruisers to converted civilian transports with makeshift weapons. They're desperate. 3,000 ships, even damaged and poorly coordinated, that was a massive force. But Dae Hyun had learned something important during this war. Numbers didn't matter as much as people thought. What mattered was training, tactics, and the will to do what was necessary. On Earth, President Kwon Shin faced the hardest decision of her career. She stood in the war room with her senior advisors, looking at projections of the final battle. The casualties would be enormous on both sides. "We can end this," Admiral Kim said quietly. "One massive strike against their homeworld. Destroy their government and military leadership. The Dominion would fragment into independent colonies that pose no threat." "You're talking about killing millions of civilians," the president said. "Their leadership is located in population centers. We can't strike without massive collateral damage." "We can show restraint," Dr. Hanaseo interjected. "Give them a chance to surrender. Make the terms clear. If they accept, we stop here. If they refuse, then they've made their choice." The president looked at each of her advisors. "And if they surrender, what then? We can't just leave and hope they've learned their lesson." "We occupy their core worlds," Admiral Kim said. "Military governance for a generation. We dismantle their military infrastructure completely. We teach them what it means to live under rules enforced by something they fear. It's not kind, but it works." President Shin felt the weight of billions of lives on her shoulders. "Send the surrender terms. Give them 48 hours to respond. Make it clear that this is their only chance. After that, we do whatever is necessary to end this war permanently." The message reached Supreme Overlord Thexer in his command bunker beneath the Vrexian capital. He read it multiple times, each word like a blade cutting away his pride. The terms were harsh but not impossible. Surrender all military assets. Accept human oversight of government. Pay reparations over 50 years. Allow human observers unlimited access to ensure compliance. In exchange, the war would end immediately and Vrexian civilians would be protected. "If we accept this, we become subjects," one of his advisors said. "The Dominion has existed for 3,000 years. We've never bowed to anyone. And if we refuse?" Thexer asked. "Then the humans will destroy us. They've proven they can do it. The question is whether we die with pride or live with shame." Thexer thought about his people, the billions of Vrexians who had never wanted this war. They were dying because of his arrogance, his assumption that humanity was weak. He had broken the galaxy's peace because he couldn't imagine that a young species might be dangerous. "What kind of leader would I be if I chose pride over survival?" he said quietly. "We started this war. We crossed their boundary. We ignored their warnings. Perhaps it's time to accept the consequences of our actions." But even as Thexer considered surrender, other forces were moving. Intelligence Officer Hyun Bae discovered something disturbing in the data patterns he was analyzing. The Vrexian War hadn't been entirely random. Someone had been manipulating events behind the scenes. "Admiral, I need to show you this," Hyun reported, pulling up communication intercepts. "These are messages between Vrexian military officers and representatives from the Kelthani Federation." The Kelthani were feeding the Vrexians intelligence about human colony locations. They were encouraging the attacks. "Why would the Kelthani do that?" Admiral Kim demanded. "Because they wanted us to fight. Think about it. The Kelthani are one of the Council's economic powers. They compete with Earth for trade routes and resources. If the Vrexians destroyed us or forced us into a costly war, the Kelthani benefit. They were using the Vrexians as a proxy to eliminate a competitor. The revelation changed everything. This wasn't just a war between humanity and the Vrexians. It was part of a larger game being played by species that saw the newcomers as a threat to their power. "Do we have proof?" the Admiral asked. "Enough to present to the Council. But sir, this means the problem is bigger than we thought. Even if we defeat the Vrexians, other species will try similar tactics. They'll never accept humanity as an equal. We're too different. Too dangerous in their eyes." Across the galaxy, the economic consequences of the war were becoming catastrophic. Species that had invested in trade and cultural development for thousands of years were now diverting massive resources to military buildup. Everyone was afraid. Afraid that humanity might turn on them next. Afraid that their own neighbors might attack while they were weak. Afraid that the peace they had known their entire lives was gone forever. Diplomat Sora Jin traveled between systems, desperately trying to contain the damage. She spoke a dozen languages and understood alien psychology, but even her skills were being tested. "Your people have destroyed 10,000 years of peace," an alien leader accused her. "The galaxy was stable before you arrived." "The galaxy was complacent," Sora replied. "You had peace because no one tested it. Because no one remembered what war actually meant. The Vrexians tested it and it broke. That's not humanity's fault. We just revealed the truth that you were all ignoring. But you're the ones who escalated it. You could have defended your colony and stopped. Instead, you invaded Vrexian space. You're dismantling their entire civilization." "Because half measures don't work," Sora said firmly. "If we had stopped after defending New Jeju, the Vrexians would have rebuilt and attacked again. Other species would have seen it as weakness. We'd be fighting this same war every generation. Better to be brutal once than to repeat this cycle endlessly. And now everyone fears you." "Good," Sora said, though the word tasted bitter. "Fear isn't ideal, but it's better than ignorance. For 50 years, you all thought humanity was harmless. That ignorance led to war. Now you know we're dangerous. But you also know we only fight when threatened. That's deterrence. That's how peace actually works when predators are involved." The alien leader stared at her. "You've changed the galaxy forever. The Vrexians changed it." We just responded, but Sora knew it wasn't that simple. Every choice humanity made during this war had consequences. They had revealed their military power. They had used banned weapons. They had shown the galaxy a level of systematic violence that no one had seen in millennia. There was no going back to the innocence of first contact. Humanity would always be the dangerous species now. The predators among the prey. The 48-hour deadline approached. Across human space, military forces prepared for the final assault. Ships were positioned. Weapons were armed. Soldiers said quiet prayers to whatever gods they believed in. On the Vrexian homeworld, Supreme Overlord Thexer stood before his council for the last time. "I will not be remembered kindly," he said. "History will say I destroyed the Dominion through arrogance. And history will be correct. But I can still choose how this ends. I can choose survival over pride." He sent the message to Earth. The Dominion accepted humanity's terms. The war was over. When news of the surrender reached Earth, there was no celebration. President Quan Shin sat in her office looking at casualty reports. 4,000 human military personnel dead. 23,000 wounded. Unknown numbers of Vrexian casualties, both military and civilian. All because one species thought another was weak. "We won," Admiral Kim said quietly, standing beside her. "Did we?" the president asked. "Look at what we've become. Look at what we had to do. We came to the stars hoping to be better than our ancestors, hoping to leave our violent past behind. But the moment we were threatened, we became exactly what we tried to escape. Efficient killers, conquerors, the monsters our own history warned us about. We defended our people, I know, and I would make the same choices again. That's what frightens me. We've proven that humanity can wage war better than any species in the galaxy. But can we prove that we can maintain peace? Can we show that we're more than just apex predators who happen to develop space travel?" The Admiral had no answer. Dr. Hanaseo published a new study as the war ended. She called it the Catastrophe of Revelation. In it, she analyzed not just the war itself, but its rippling consequences across the galaxy. "Humanity's victory was inevitable," she wrote. "We are evolutionarily optimized for systematic violence. But the true catastrophe isn't military defeat. It's the collapse." Half remained to continue the assault on New Jeju, while the main battle group changed course toward Earth's home. The first shots came from the hidden installations around Jupiter. They were simple weapons, really. Just solid metal rods accelerated to incredible speeds using electromagnetic force. No fancy energy beams or plasma cannons, just kinetic energy and physics. The lead Vrexian cruiser never had a chance. One moment it was scanning the area for threats. The next moment it simply ceased to exist, transformed into an expanding cloud of debris and atmosphere. The ship behind it had just enough time to broadcast a warning before it too was destroyed. Supreme Overlord Thexer stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "What kind of weapons are those? Report." "Kinetic projectiles, sir," his weapons officer said, voice shaking. "Primitive technology, but the velocity is impossible. They're using electromagnetic acceleration systems far beyond what we thought they possessed. Our shields are designed to deflect energy weapons. They can't stop solid matter moving at those speeds. Evasive maneuvers. Return fire immediately." The Vrexian fleet scattered, but the human weapons tracked them with perfect accuracy. More ships died. Then something even worse happened. The space around Earth's moon rippled and ships began appearing. Dozens of them, hundreds. They had been there all along, hidden by technology the Vrexians didn't know existed. The human fleet looked different from the sleek Vrexian vessels. These ships were angular and brutal, covered in armor plating and weapon hardpoints. They looked like they had been designed for one purpose only: war. Lieutenant Junho Lee sat in the cockpit of his fighter craft, part of a squadron launching from a carrier that officially didn't exist in any human military records. His ship was small and fast, armed with missiles that contained nuclear warheads. The Galactic Council had banned such weapons 4,000 years ago, calling them barbaric and indiscriminate. But humanity had never signed those agreements. They had simply pretended to comply while hiding their real arsenal. "All fighters, this is your flight commander," a voice said over the radio. The Vrexians wanted to see what humanity keeps hidden. "Today we show them weapons are free. Engage at will." Junho felt his heart racing as he locked onto a Vrexian destroyer. His hands were steady, though, trained through thousands of hours of simulation. Humanity had never stopped training for war, even during the peaceful decades. They had just done it quietly. His missile launched with a brief flash of light. 5 seconds later, a miniature sun bloomed against the Vrexian ship's shields. The nuclear explosion was small by historical human standards, but devastating against technology that had never been designed to withstand such brutal force. The destroyer's shields collapsed and the ship tumbled helplessly through space. "Target neutralized," Junho reported. His voice was calm, but inside he felt sick. This was what his species was good at. This was their talent: violence and destruction. Back on New Jeju, the Vrexian assault had stalled. Captain Seok Han's defenders were still heavily outnumbered, but they fought with tactics the aliens had never encountered. They used the terrain to their advantage. They retreated and then ambushed pursuers. They targeted enemy officers and communication equipment instead of just shooting at the nearest threat. "They're not fighting like civilized beings," a Vrexian officer reported to his commander. "They're using guerrilla tactics, psychological warfare. They're trying to break our morale." The Vrexian commander didn't fully understand the concept of morale. His species had been peaceful for so long that the psychological aspects of warfare were foreign to them. They followed orders and expected to win through superior numbers and technology. But these humans fought differently. They fought dirty. In orbit above the colony, the Vrexian ships were suffering too. Every time they tried to bombard human positions, automated defense systems shot down their missiles. Every time they tried to land troops, human fighters appeared from nowhere to attack the transport ships. The Vrexians had more ships and more firepower, but the humans were using it against them. And worst of all, the humans were broadcasting everything. Every battle. Every engagement. They were making sure the entire galaxy watched as humanity demonstrated what modern warfare actually looked like. On Earth, Chief Engineer Nari Yoon stood in the control center of the Jupiter shipyards. Around her, massive automated factories worked without stopping. Raw materials entered one end. Fully functional warships emerged from the other. The process was so fast it seemed impossible. "How many ships can we produce at current capacity?" an officer asked her. "Approximately 50 per week," Nari replied calmly. "We can increase that number if necessary." The factories were designed to scale up in an emergency. 50 warships every week? The officer looked stunned. "How long have we had this capability?" "Since the day we joined the Galactic Council," Nari said. The government at the time decided we needed insurance. They built these shipyards in secret, hidden under Jupiter's moons where no alien sensors would detect them. We had to be able to defend ourselves if the Council ever turned against us, so we hid our real military strength and showed the galaxy only what they expected to see. She pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's true military assets. Thousands of ships in hidden storage facilities. Weapons that violated dozens of Council laws. Technology that humanity had developed in secret while pretending to adopt alien standards. We lied to them, the officer said softly. We survived, Nari corrected. That's what humanity does. We adapt. We hide when we're weak. We strike when we're threatened. And we make sure our enemies never get a second chance to hurt us. The Battle of Sol lasted 3 hours and 17 minutes. When it ended, 60% of the Vrexian fleet was destroyed and the rest were fleeing at maximum speed back toward their own territory. Supreme Overlord Thexer survived only because his flagship had the best shields and fastest engines of any ship in his fleet. He sat in his command chair, staring at damage reports. His species had fought minor conflicts before, border disputes that lasted a few days at most. But this was something completely different. The humans had fought with a focused intensity that felt utterly alien and terrifying. They used nuclear weapons, his weapons officer said, still in shock. They used kinetic bombardment. They used psychological warfare and targeted assassinations. These tactics are banned by every civilized species in the galaxy. Perhaps, Thexor said slowly, the Council banned them because they're effective. A message came through from the human fleet. Admiral Yang Kim appeared on the screen. His face was hard and emotionless like he had done this 1,000 times before. Supreme Overlord Thexer, you crossed our boundary. You ignored our warnings. You attacked our citizens. Now you will return to Vrexian space and you will spread this message to every species in the galaxy. Humanity is done hiding. We tried to be peaceful. We tried to follow the Council's rules. But when you threaten our people, we respond with everything we have. And trust me when I tell you, you have not seen everything we're capable of yet. Not even close. The transmission ended. Thexer sat in silence for a long moment, then gave the order to retreat. Pride didn't matter anymore. Survival did. Across the galaxy, every species that belonged to the Galactic Council watched recordings of the battle. They saw human weapons that shouldn't exist. They saw tactics that were supposed to be ancient history. They saw a species that had been hiding its true nature for 50 years. And the revelation was terrifying. In the Council chambers on the neutral station, representatives from dozens of worlds argued and shouted. The room was chaos. Humanity violated 17 major laws during that engagement, one delegate declared. They used banned weapons. They showed no mercy. They must be punished for their actions. Dr. Hanasio stood at the human podium and her voice cut through the noise. Punished? You ignored our complaints for months. You dismissed us when we asked for help. You let the Vrexians harass us because you thought we were weak. And now that we've defended ourselves successfully, you want to punish us. No, that's not how this works anymore. You lied to us, another council member accused. You hid your military capabilities. You pretended to be weak when you were actually very dangerous. Yes, we did, Hana admitted without shame, because we know what we are. We know our own history. Humanity's past is written in blood. We fought wars that killed millions of our own people. We built weapons capable of destroying our entire planet. We reached space by standing on the graves of our ancestors. When we met you, we made a choice. We decided to hide that violent nature and try to live peacefully in your civilized galaxy, but you mistook our choice for weakness. You thought we were harmless. She activated a display showing footage from the battle. Look at this. Really look. We didn't just defeat the Vrexians. We destroyed them with systematic efficiency. This is what humanity does when we stop holding back. This is what we're good at, and we've been suppressing it for 50 years because we wanted to be part of your peaceful society. You're monsters, someone whispered. Perhaps, Hana said quietly. But we're your monsters now, because the Vrexians forced us to reveal what we really are, and now everyone knows the truth. Humanity is the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because we're stronger or Esme. Admiral Taeyang Ko stood on the bridge of the carrier Indomitable, watching the stars through the viewport. Behind him stretched what Earth called the Retribution Fleet, over 200 warships that had been hidden in storage for decades. The human government had decided that defending their borders wasn't enough. The Vrexians needed to learn that starting wars with humanity came with consequences. "Sir, we're approaching the outer Vrexian colonies," his tactical officer reported. "They have orbital defenses, but nothing like their main battle fleet. Most of those ships were destroyed at Sol." "Good," Taiyang said. He was older than most combat officers, with gray hair and lines on his face that spoke of hard decisions. He had studied military history his entire career, not because he loved war, but because he understood that lasting peace required strength. "Implement the old war doctrine. We don't just defeat them. We ensure they can never threaten us again." The old war doctrine came from Earth's violent past. When nations fought total wars, they didn't just win battles. They destroyed the enemy's ability to make war in the future. It was brutal and efficient, and it made most humans uncomfortable. But it worked. The human fleet swept through Vrexian space like a storm. They didn't just destroy military targets. They systematically dismantled shipyards, manufacturing centers, supply depots, and communication networks. It wasn't enough to win today's battle. They needed to ensure the Vrexians couldn't build another fleet for decades. Dr. Suji Kang coordinated psychological operations from a facility on Earth. She specialized in what humanity called information warfare, the art of breaking enemy morale without firing a shot. Her weapons weren't missiles or railguns. They were cameras and broadcasts. "We're streaming live footage of every engagement," she explained to her team. "The entire galaxy is watching as we systematically dismantle Vrexian military power. We want other species to see what happens when you attack humanity, not because we enjoy cruelty, but because fear prevents wars. If everyone is afraid to start a conflict with us, then we never have to fight them." The broadcast showed Vrexian ships being disabled with surgical precision, human boarding parties taking control of space stations, enemy prisoners being treated according to human military law, which was actually more generous than what most aliens expected. But the message was clear. Humanity knew how to wage war properly, and they would not stop until their enemies were no longer threats. "Isn't this excessive?" one of Suji's assistants asked quietly. "We've already won. The Vrexians are retreating from all human territory." "Excessive by council standards, perhaps," Suji replied. "But in human history, being too merciful led to repeat wars. The enemy would rebuild and attack again in a generation. If we don't make the consequences absolutely clear right now, someone else will test us in 10 years. Better to be harsh once than to fight the same war repeatedly." That's the lesson humanity learned the hard way over thousands of years. On the colony of New Jeju, Governor Jiwoo Park walked through the settlement. The Vrexian assault had damaged many buildings, but her people were rebuilding. 47 colonists had died defending their home. Hundreds more carried injuries. The cost had been high, but they had survived. Captain Seok Han found her standing among the ruins. Earth is sending massive reinforcements. New defensive platforms, additional ships, construction materials. They're turning us into a fortress. "I didn't want to be a fortress," Jiwoo said softly. "I wanted to build a peaceful colony, a place where humans could live differently than we did on Earth. Maybe we can be both now." Jiwoo shook her head. "No, don't you understand what's happening? We're changing. The entire galaxy is changing because of this war. That innocence we tried to maintain, that hope we could be different than our ancestors, it's gone. We tried to leave our violent nature behind, but it followed us to the stars." She showed him reports from across human space. Every colony was being militarized. Every civilian was receiving combat training. Earth's government was openly discussing territorial expansion into regions that had been neutral before. "We won the battle," Jiwoo continued. "But I'm not sure we'll like what we're becoming because of it. We're turning back into what we tried to escape. Warriors, conquerors, the very thing we feared we might be." Intelligence officer Hyun Bae worked from a secure facility on Earth's moon, analyzing data streams from across Vrexian space. What he discovered worried him more than the initial conflict had. "They're not surrendering," he reported to Admiral Kim. "The Vrexians are pulling back, yes, but they're mobilizing their entire empire. They're stripping every colony of ships and personnel. They still think they can win if they just bring enough force." "They're in denial," the Admiral said. "They can't accept that they're fundamentally outmatched. It's more complex than that. Our psychological profiles indicate that Vrexian culture is built on concepts of dominance and strength. If they surrender to humans, other species might challenge their authority. They would rather risk total destruction than show weakness to the galaxy." Admiral Kim studied the intelligence reports carefully.
How long until they can launch another major offensive?
4 to 6 months. And this time it won't be a probing attack. It will be their entire military force concentrated on one goal, destroying Earth and humanity's ability to resist. Then we need to end this before they get that chance. If the Vrexians throw everything at us, casualties on both sides will be catastrophic. Millions could die. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions every day, but nothing productive happened. The Council had been designed to facilitate diplomacy between species that wanted peace. It had no mechanisms for handling a species like humanity that understood total warfare and wasn't afraid to use it. We demand that humanity cease offensive operations immediately, a council representative declared. The original provocation has been answered. The Vrexian fleet has been defeated. Continuing this campaign is unnecessary aggression. Dr. Hana Seo stood at the human podium, and her patience was wearing thin. The Vrexians started a war. We're ending it properly. If we stop now, they'll rebuild their military and attack again. They'll see our mercy as weakness. Is that what you want? Another war in 20 years? We want peace. Then you should have maintained peace when we asked for your help, Hana shot back. We followed your procedures. We filed proper complaints. We tried diplomacy. And you dismissed us because we were new and weak in your eyes. Now we're showing you what happens when the weak turn out to be apex predators. You call yourselves predators? Another alien stood, their translated voice dripping with disgust. You admit you're dangerous monsters? Hana was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that silenced the entire chamber. Every intelligent species in this council evolved from prey animals or peaceful omnivores. You're all descended from creatures that survived by hiding, by running, by cooperating to avoid threats. But Earth's dominant species? We evolved from persistence hunters. Our ancestors chased prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. We're descended from the creatures that gave your ancestors nightmares. Yes, that makes us different. We see the universe through a predator's eyes. The council chamber was utterly silent. But here's what you need to understand, Hana continued. Predators can choose not to hunt. We can decide there's enough for everyone. We can protect the weak instead of preying on them. For 50 years, that's exactly what we did. We chose to be peaceful. We chose restraint over violence. But the Vrexians took that choice away from us. They forced us to reveal our true nature. And now you're seeing what humanity really is when we stop holding back. We're survivors who will do anything to protect our people. And right now that means ensuring the Vrexians never threaten us again. You're talking about destroying an entire civilization, someone said. No, Hana replied firmly. We're talking about removing their ability to wage war. The Vrexians can survive. They can rebuild their society. They can live peaceful lives. But they will not have the military power to threaten anyone again. That's the price of starting a war with humanity. That's the lesson we're teaching. Admiral Taeyang Ko's fleet continued its advance through Vrexian territory. The aliens fought back when they could, but human tactics were simply too advanced. Where the Vrexians expected traditional space battles with ships exchanging fire in neat formations, humans used ambushes, hit-and-run attacks, electronic warfare, and psychological operations. They're calling us dishonorable, one officer reported. The Vrexians say we don't fight like civilized beings. They say our tactics are cowardly. They're absolutely right, Taeyang said without shame. We don't fight fair. We fight to win with minimum casualties on our side. Honor is a luxury you can afford when you're so powerful that you don't need advantages. But humanity clawed its way up from the bottom. We learned to survive by being smarter, more vicious and more adaptable than anything else on our planet. That's not civilized, but it is effective. But victory came with costs that weren't visible on tactical displays. Human soldiers were returning from combat changed. Some felt pride in what they had accomplished, proud that their species could defend itself. Commander Dae-hyun watched the red dots blink on his screen. Each dot was a Vrexian ship that had entered human space without permission. He counted 15 violations this month alone. The aliens were testing them, pushing to see how far they could go before humanity pushed back. They think we're weak, said Dr. Hana Seo. She stood next to him in the observation deck of the frontier station. Outside the windows, stars stretched endlessly into the darkness. Hana was a scientist who studied alien behavior, and she had been warning him about this for months. Dae-hyun rubbed his tired eyes. We've sent 17 formal complaints to the Galactic Council. Every time they say the same thing. Navigation errors. Honest mistakes. They don't take us seriously. Because we're new, Hana said. Humanity has only been part of the galactic community for 50 years. To them, we're children. They've been traveling the stars for thousands of years. They think they know everything. The commander pulled up another display. This one showed Earth's military forces spread across 20 colony worlds. By galactic standards, it looked pathetic. A few dozen ships. Old weapons. Nothing impressive. Nothing that would scare a major power like the Vrexian Dominion. Admiral Yong Kim wants to fight, Daehyun said quietly. He's been pushing the government to authorize military action. He says we need to show strength before the Vrexians think they can take whatever they want. Hana shook her head. That would be suicide. The Vrexian fleet is massive. They have hundreds of warships. We can't win a direct fight against them. Maybe that's exactly what they're counting on. Back on Earth, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, Admiral Yong Kim stood in a room that most people didn't know existed. The war room had been built during humanity's early space age, back when they first reached for the stars. After first contact with aliens, the government had sealed it away. They wanted to appear peaceful. Now it was active again. The Council has kept peace in the galaxy for 10,000 years, an analyst said, reading from a report. Our research shows that most alien species haven't fought a real war in all that time. They've forgotten what warfare actually means. Admiral Kim studied the data with cold, calculating eyes. And humanity? How long since our last major war? 200 years, sir. But we kept all the records, all the tactics, all the strategies. We studied our own history even when we pretended we didn't need it anymore. The Admiral opened a classified file. It showed a map of the solar system with a massive red circle drawn around it. The Forbidden Zone. When humanity joined the Galactic Council, they had made one demand. No alien ships could enter the Sol system without permission. The Council had agreed easily, thinking humans just wanted to protect their home planet. But the aliens never asked why the Forbidden Zone was so large. Why it included Jupiter and Saturn and all their moons. Why humanity had been so insistent about it. Keep watching the situation, Kim ordered, and make sure the facilities are ready. If this goes bad, we'll need them operational immediately. On the colony world of New Jeju, Governor Jiwoo Park stood on a balcony watching the sunset. The planet was beautiful, with purple skies and twin moons that rose in the evening. The Galactic Council had given this world to humanity without argument, because it was far from trade routes. Poor and valuable resources, worthless by their standards. What they didn't know was that humanity preferred being underestimated. They preferred being forgotten out on the edges of civilized space. Captain Seok Han approached the governor. His uniform was dusty from working in the colony, but his expression was serious. Ma'am, we have a situation. Vrexian ships just entered orbit. 5 destroyers and 1 command carrier. Jiwoo felt her stomach tighten. Have they contacted us? Yes. They're demanding we evacuate the planet within 48 hours. They claim this territory belongs to the Vrexian Dominion now. Based on what authority? They say we never properly registered our claim with the Council. Captain Seok's jaw clenched. It's a lie. Our documentation is perfect, but the Council won't help us. They never do when it involves humanity. Jiwoo walked to the communication console. Send a message to Earth immediately. Tell them the Vrexians have crossed the line. Then start preparing the colonists. If they won't leave us alone, we'll make them regret coming here. Governor, we have 300 security personnel against their battle fleet. We can't possibly win this fight. We don't need to win, Captain. We just need to make them understand that attacking humans comes with a price. Even if we're small, even if we're new, we don't surrender. The message reached Earth within hours through the quantum communication network. Admiral Kim took it directly to the civilian government. President Kwon Shin read it 3 times in complete silence. They want to take our colony, the president said finally. After all our efforts at peace, after all our compromises, they're just taking what they want because they think we're too weak to stop them. The Galactic Council won't intervene, Admiral Kim said. Dr. Hana Seo has studied their psychology extensively. She says they view warfare as something primitive and barbaric. They can't even imagine that we might fight back effectively. To them, we're just another minor species that will surrender when threatened. President Shin stood and walked to the window. Below, the lights of the city stretched to the horizon. Billions of humans living peaceful lives. Lives that would change forever depending on what decision was made in this room. What are our real options? The president asked. We can abandon the colony and accept that we'll always be victims. We can file more complaints with the council that they'll ignore, or we can show the galaxy what humanity actually is. And what are we, Admiral? Kim's expression was grim. Survivors, ma'am. We evolved on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. We fought wars that destroyed continents. We built weapons capable of ending all life on Earth. We had to learn control the hard way. Every other species in the council was handed peace by their biology or their environment. They never had to fight for it. But we did. And we never forgot those lessons, no matter how much we pretended. The president was quiet for a long moment. If we fight back, everything changes. The galaxy will see us differently. They'll fear us. They should fear us, the Admiral replied. Maybe then they'll stop crossing our boundaries. Maybe then they'll understand that humanity's patience has limits. President Shin made the hardest decision of her life. Send the message to the Rexians. Tell them they have 24 hours to withdraw from New Jeju and all human territory. Make the consequences absolutely clear. And if they ignore us, then we remind the galaxy what we're capable of. And may whatever gods exist forgive us. The message reached Supreme Overlord Thexer aboard his flagship in orbit around New Jeju. He read it once, then started laughing. His officers looked uncomfortable, but none of them spoke. These primitive creatures threaten us? Thexer could barely contain his amusement. They can barely travel between stars. They have no real military power. And they dare to give us ultimatums? His tactical officer hesitated before speaking. Sir, there is something unusual in their data. Earth has a forbidden zone around their home system. It's very large and they've never explained its purpose. They're probably hiding how weak they truly are. Thexer said dismissively. Besides, we won't need to enter their precious system. We'll take their colonies one by one until they surrender. It will be over in weeks. Begin the invasion of New Jeju. The Vrexian fleet moved into attack position. On the planet's surface, Captain Siak Han had organized the colonists into defensive positions. They had mining equipment converted into makeshift weapons, tunnels that could serve as bunkers. Every person who could hold a gun had been given one in basic training. They'll bombard us from orbit first, one of his officers said nervously. That's standard procedure. Destroy our defenses before landing ground troops. Let them try, Seok Han replied calmly. This colony has some surprises. Humanity always has surprises. As the Vrexian ships entered weapons range, New Jeju's defenses activated. Hidden missile batteries emerged from camouflaged positions. Railguns that had been disguised as mining equipment swiveled toward the sky. Energy shields flickered to life around key installations. Shields that were technically illegal under council law, but that humanity had installed secretly anyway. The first Vrexian destroyer took 3 direct hits before its captain even realized they were under attack. The ship didn't explode, but it limped away from the battle-trailing atmosphere and debris. Supreme Overlord Thexer watched from his command ship, and for the first time, a hint of doubt entered his mind. They're actually fighting back. They're organized and well-armed. Should we withdraw and reassess, sir? No! Thexer's pride wouldn't allow retreat. They're just delaying the inevitable. Increase the attack, and prepare to cross into their forbidden zone. If we cut off their reinforcements from Earth, this ends quickly. The tactical officer pulled up a navigation display. Sir, Earth specifically warned us not to cross that boundary. Their message was very clear about consequences. Empty threats from a dying colony, Thexor declared. Take us into the Sol system. Let's see what these humans are really hiding behind all their posturing. The Vrexian fleet split its forces. 6 months after the Vrexian surrender, the galaxy looked completely different. The Galactic Council had been reformed with new power structures that acknowledged reality rather than pretending all species were equal. Humanity now held one of the 5 primary leadership positions, a role that would have been unthinkable before the war. Elder statesman Jin Wu represented Earth in the new council. He was old enough to remember when humanity first reached the stars, young enough when nations still fought wars on Earth itself. He understood better than most what burden his species now carried. We never wanted this responsibility, he said in his first formal address to the council. Humanity joined the galactic community hoping to learn from species that had achieved lasting peace. We wanted to be students of your civilization, not teachers. But the war forced us to reveal our true nature. And now everyone knows what we are. What we've always been. He paused, looking at each alien representative. Some met his eyes. Others looked away, still afraid of what humanity represented. So here is our promise, Jinwoo continued. Humanity will not start wars. We will not expand through conquest. We will not use our military superiority to dominate others. But we will finish any conflict that begins with aggression against us or our allies. We will respond to threats with overwhelming force. And we will ensure that breaking the peace always costs more than any potential gain. This is not a threat. It's a guarantee. The galaxy can have peace, but it must be a peace that everyone respects and maintains. That sounds like you're appointing yourselves as Galactic Police, a council member said carefully. No, Jinwoo replied. We're stating clearly what we will and won't tolerate. The old peace was based on ignorance and good intentions. The new peace must be based on clear boundaries and genuine deterrence. Everyone now knows what humanity is capable of. That knowledge is what will maintain stability. Fear of consequences prevents conflict far more effectively than hope for cooperation. In the months following the surrender, the true scope of changes became apparent. The forbidden zone around Earth expanded dramatically. What had once been just the Sol system now included a sphere of space, 10 light-years in diameter, all under direct human control. Multiple defense stations monitored every approach. Ships entering human space without proper authorization were intercepted immediately. Young Officer Eunbi Song stood watch on one of the new boundary stations. She was part of the generation born after humanity joined the Council. She had grown up hearing about alien species and galactic cooperation. The war was something she had watched on broadcasts but never experienced directly. Do you think we'll have to fight again? She asked her commanding officer during a quiet shift. The older officer, a veteran of the Vrexian campaign, looked out at the stars through the observation port. I hope not. But your generation needs to be ready if it happens. That's the price of what we are now. We have to maintain strength so overwhelming that no one dares test us, and we have to be wise enough not to abuse that strength. It seems like a lot to ask. It is, but that's humanity's burden now. We're the guardians of a peace we never wanted to enforce. We're the predators who keep other predators in check. It's not the future we imagined, but it's the reality we have to live with. Yunbi thought about that as she monitored the sensors. Somewhere beyond the boundary, other species were making their own calculations, wondering if humanity could be trusted, wondering if they should prepare for war or hope for peace. The galaxy had become a more uncertain place, and humanity was responsible for that uncertainty. The Vrexian core worlds existed under human military governance. Admiral Taeyang Ko oversaw the occupation, a role he had never wanted but accepted out of duty. His forces maintained order while Vrexian society slowly rebuilt itself under new constraints. They hate us, one of his officers reported. The civilian population cooperates, but you can see it in their eyes. They view us as conquerors, oppressors. They're not wrong, Taeyang said quietly. We did conquer them. We did take their freedom. The fact that we're treating them fairly doesn't change that fundamental reality. We destroyed their military, occupied their worlds, and now we're reshaping their society according to our standards. That's what empires do. We can call it protective governance or security guarantees, but the Vrexians know what it really is. Does that bother you, sir? Every day, the Admiral admitted. I became a military officer to defend humanity, not to rule over aliens. But here we are, and the alternative was to let them rebuild and attack us again in 20 years. So we made a choice. We chose long-term security over short-term mercy. History will judge whether we were right. On the former Vrexian capital, Supreme Overlord Thexor lived in a simple dwelling, stripped of his titles and power. The humans allowed him to live freely as a private citizen, which was more mercy than he expected. He spent his days writing a memoir, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. I thought we were the dominant power, he wrote. I thought our 3,000 years of civilization made us superior to a species that had barely left their home system. I was wrong. Humanity's youth wasn't weakness. It was danger. They hadn't forgotten how to fight because they'd only recently stopped fighting themselves. While we grew soft in peace, they remained sharp through memory and preparation. Commander Daehyun returned to New Jeju for the first time in months. The colony had been transformed. What was once a small settlement of a few thousand people had become a fortress city, with military infrastructure and defensive systems that could withstand a major assault. Governor Jiwoo. Park met him at the landing pad. She looked older, more tired than he remembered. "Welcome back to our fortress," she said with bitter irony. "This is what we built, what we had to become." They walked through the settlement together. Children played in parks surrounded by concealed missile batteries. Families ate dinner in homes built over bunker systems. Normal life lived on top of constant preparation for war. "Do you regret it?" Dae-hyun asked. "The choice to fight instead of evacuate?" "Every day," Jiwoo said. "But I'd make the same choice again. We had to show the galaxy that humanity doesn't surrender, that attacking us costs more than anyone wants to pay. The people who died here didn't die for nothing. They died so future generations might not have to fight at all. You think that's possible? Real peace? I think it's what we have to believe. Otherwise, what was the point? We became monsters to protect our people. If we can't find a way back to something better, then the monsters won. And we just lost ourselves in the process." Dr. Hanaseo spent her time traveling between systems, meeting with representatives from species who were still trying to understand humanity. She had become an informal ambassador, explaining human nature to aliens who found it completely foreign. "Why do you prepare for war even during peace?" one alien asked her. "You've won. Everyone fears you. Why continue building weapons and training soldiers?" "Because deterrence only works if it's real," Hana explained. "If we disarmed now, someone would eventually test us again. They'd think we'd gone soft. The only way to maintain peace is to make certain everyone knows we could wage war if necessary. It's exhausting and it's expensive, but it's the price of being what we are." "And what are you?" "Survivors," Hana said simply. "Humanity survived by being more dangerous than anything else on our planet. We survived by never forgetting threats, by always preparing for the worst. Other species evolved past that mindset. We can't. It's written into our genes. The best we can do is control it and use it wisely." The Galactic Council established a new protocol called the Boundary Agreement. Every species had the right to establish protected space around their core systems. Crossing those boundaries without permission was now the galaxy's most serious crime, one that would trigger unified response from all council members. "This is humanity's doing," some species said. "They've militarized the entire galaxy with their paranoia." But others understood the truth. The boundaries existed because humanity had proven that peace without enforcement was just waiting for war. The agreement codified what everyone now knew. Threats had to have clear consequences, or they meant nothing. On Earth, President Quan Shin's term was ending. She stood in her office on the last day, looking at the planet below. Cities of billions who would never fully understand the choices she'd had to make, the weapons she'd authorized, the deaths she'd accepted as necessary. "Do you think we did the right thing?" she asked Admiral Kim, who had come to see her before she left office. "We kept humanity alive," the Admiral replied. "We turned a war that could have destroyed us into a victory that secured our future." That's what leaders do. They make impossible choices so their people can live. But at what cost? We revealed what we are. We can never go back to being seen as a peaceful species. We're the predators now, forever. We were always predators, ma'am. We just hid it better before. Maybe it's better that everyone knows the truth. Honest fear is more stable than false security. The president wasn't sure she agreed, but she understood his point. The galaxy had changed, and there was no reversing it. Humanity had crossed a line during the war, and now they had to live with the consequences. In schools across human space, children learned a new curriculum.